Here you see a painting of a scraggly old pine tree in a foggy evergreen forest that I recently did. The big problem with painting is that when you're done, you need to frame it, which can be pretty expensive these days. But you can always make one yourself. So today we're going to do a quick how-to video, and we'll be making a rustic pallet frame for paintings. In this case, it's an acrylic canvas panel that's about 10 by 14 inches. But anything in that general size range should be good with the width of most pallet wood. First off, we'll take an old pallet and smack some boards off with a big hammer. I generally like to use dry pallets for this, since new pallets or wet ones tend to make the nails rusty and they stick to the wood a bit more. As you can see, it doesn't take too many smacks before the boards start coming off. Sometimes they crack, and that's okay, because pallets are everywhere. Just whack another board or two out. And we'll take out some of these nails by bending them back and forth and then tapping them out. And then we'll use a wrench to yank them out the other side, since these boards are thin enough to do that. If this were a much thicker pallet board, then it might be a little harder to do that, and you'd probably want to use some sort of a nail removal tool. And you can see how nice and rustic it looks with that rough cut, with lots of color variation, and the knots, cracks, and nail heads and splinters just add to the charm of the whole thing, in my opinion. Then we'll take a protractor and make some nice 45-degree cut marks so that the final pieces we cut out have internal lengths of slightly less than the numbers we need. Make sure to double check these interior lengths because that's what will be up against the edge of your painting. And we want to make sure there's just a little bit of overlap to cover at least a few millimeters or maybe up to, say, a centimeter of the edge of your painting. And now we'll make our cuts. Note that I'm just using a table saw and not like a bandsaw or a scroll saw, because we're going for a rustic look and the rough edges don't really matter too much. And since pallets are basically free everywhere, you can mess up a bunch of pieces and redo them and there's no penalty. Or you can always make more than you need and just make more frames, which I'm going to need to do. And you see when you line up the pieces how nicely they come together. And they're not going to be seamless, of course, because of the rough cuts, but I think they look nice that way. And we'll fill in the holes anyway. Here I'm just sanding down a few pieces that were a little bit too uneven, but still usable. You can see that when we put the pieces next to each other, it's really coming together. And we'll close these gaps with a sort of medium-duty manual staple gun. And then I'll use a small hammer to tack them into the wood the rest of the way. It'll be a little wobbly at this point, but that's okay. Then I go back in there with some hot glue on the backside to make it a little bit more sturdy, but Gorilla Glue works really well here to fill in the gaps as well. After that, I go back to the front and fill in these gaps with some wood glue, and then I rub in some wood shavings from under the table saw to make sure the wood color matches the frame. It's sort of a cheap way of making your own wood filler. Once it's dry, I do a little tiny bit of sanding, not too much, and then I go over the whole front and interior with a bit of light wood stain. In this case, I think it's a natural pine stain. It also has polyurethane in it, and this sort of helps to unify the uneven colors a little bit. After that, we make a few small pieces of wood for the corners of the frame to hold the picture in place and to provide a bit more structural support for the whole thing using a couple wood screws per piece. I'm also cutting out some of the flat edges of cardboard boxes here to glue into the back of the frame to act as sort of a guide or cushion for the edge of the painting. To make sure we don't crack the wood, I'm using a small pilot hole and then screwing in these edge pieces. I can later undo them and re-screw them in once I have the painting in place. Then I'm running some florist steel wire across pairs of wood screws to be able to hang the painting on the wall without worrying about it falling off. In all, this took about 20 to 30 minutes, and if you did a bunch of frames at one time, you could probably cut that time in half. And after placing the painting in there and retightening the wood screws, you can see here it's a pretty solid piece when I hold it up by the steel cable in the back. And here it is up on the wall. Hope you enjoyed this little tutorial. Thanks for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe.